I tried this with my own M10, and with a bit of reverb, OMG, there it was. The M10 allegedly shares some similar hardware with the CT201, at least according to the November 1981 issue of Electronics and Music Maker magazine. What isn't widely known is that both these keyboards, M10 and CT201, use the same VLSI chip, the D773G, and the main difference in circuitry lay in the addition of a programming switch in the more expensive model. However, way back in 1981, an independent electronics engineer called Robin Whittle, who is famous for creating the Roland TB303 Devilfish modification, made a very comprehensive and extensive modification guide for early Casio tones that shows this information to be incorrect. Robin states that the CT201 actually uses two LSIs, a D771G and a D772G, and I checked this with my own CT201 and can confirm this to be correct. There's the D771G and there's the D772G. When I had my M10 apart to look for a production date, I could clearly see that it did have a D773G LSI, as mentioned in the Electronics and Music Maker magazine article, but the M10 shares this LSI with the 14-tone CT301 and not with the 29-tone CT201. In fact, it appears that the M10 is more closely related to the CT301 than the CT201 as far as its tone-generating hardware is concerned. Robin Whittle's very comprehensive and extensive modifications guide states that the D773G LSI has the capability of producing 23 separate tones, but only 4 of them are accessible in the M10 and only 14 in the CT301. With some modifications and adding extra switches, the M10 can actually access these additional 19 tones, bringing its total to 23. Robin's research also found that even more unused features can be accessed in the M10 with further modifications. The complete list of hidden features in the M10 are as follows: 19 extra tones, 2 octave drops, variable tuning, hold and sustain of notes, different vibrato setting, and better high frequency response. Robin's extensive guide shows how all these extra features can be unlocked, but they all require physically modifying the M10 and adding extra switches and hardware to access them. I'll put links down below to Robin's website where you can find and download the details of all these modifications and also see his other work. As I have quite a number of vintage Casio tones that use consonant vowel synthesis and can likely already produce similar tones, I'll keep my M10 standard, as modifying to this level is beyond the scope of this video. Plus, I don't want to spoil the elegantly clean and simple lines of my M10, as limited as it may be.
M10 Fun Fact.
Which groundbreaking funk singer-songwriter owned a Casiotone M10 that was auctioned off by Christie's as part of his estate in 2008? The answer is James Brown, aka the Godfather of Funk. amazing but true. The pioneer of funk himself, the I Feel Good James Brown, owned a Casiotone M10. You can see it listed here among other James Brown related items and artifacts from his estate. Christie's estimated that it would sell between $300 to $500 but it actually sold for $750 making it probably the most expensive M10 ever sold. Interesting to note that it has masking tape above the keys, indicating that it has clearly been used and possibly had musical guide notes written on this tape to assist whoever was playing it. Maybe one of James's many children, perhaps. Or maybe Mr. Funk himself was learning to play keys with a little Casio M10. Maybe. As the M10 came out during the same era as the CT201, and even though they used different issues of the consonant vowel tone generating LSIs, let's compare the tones between them anyway. I'll play the same instrument presets at the same pitch on both keyboards so we can see how similar they may or may not be. I'll also try both the M10 and CT201 with vibrato to see if those are similar too. We are going to contrast the M10's piano tone with tone number 1 on the CT201, which is its electric piano. Straight away, they are very different to each other, not very similar at all. I'm going to try some chords now. Very different sounds. So that's surprising. I thought they'd be a little bit more similar than that, but they're not. The next M10 tone we are comparing is the violin, and that's number 28 on the CT201. That's similar. It's definitely closer than the piano was. Try some chords. I'd say those are almost identical. Maybe some slight differences in the attack, but definitely much closer than the piano tone was. Now we're going to compare the M10's flute with tone number 26 on the CT201, which is also the flute. Similar, but not as much as the violin, but definitely closer than the piano. Let's try some chords. Definitely a slower attack on the 201. It's sort of, yeah, that's similar, but definitely not identical. And the last M10 tone we're going to compare is the organ. And the CT201 has 4 organ sounds. It's got 2 organs and 2 pipe organs. And the closest I could find, I think, is tone number 19 as one of the pipe organ sounds. Let's see how they compare. Similar to the violin and flute, they're close, not identical. Let's try some chords. The M10 has a very nice organ sound. However, it's not the same as the CCT-201's organ sound. They're similar, but also kind of quite different in some respects, because the CCT-201 seems to have a richer, more complex waveform or waveforms. There's more going on, there's more movement, and it has some more higher frequencies. The M10 still has a nice organ tone. It's still very usable, but there is something very special about the organ tones in the CCT-201. And to finish off the comparison between the M10 and the CCT-201, we're going to just see how similar the vibrato is on each of these keyboards. So they're switched on there and switched on here. Interesting. It sounds to me that the vibrato between these two keyboards has the same speed, and it seems to have about the same depth of modulation. So it wouldn't be surprising if they actually use the same vibrato circuit. And to conclude the M10 and CCT-201 tone comparison, surprisingly different. I thought they'd be closer to each other than they actually are. Some of the tones are. The violin and flute are sort of in the same ballpark. The organ has some similarities with the tone number 19 on the CCT-201. And the piano was very different. That was probably the biggest surprise of all. I really thought they'd be closer in sound. The CCT-201 has more complexity. It's got more going on with its waveforms. It's got more of a richness to it and more high frequencies. The M10 is more simple. Definitely hear that they're kind of related, but then definitely not the same. So that's the really big takeaway from this, is the M10 is not a stripped down CCT-201 in any shape or form.
M10 Fun Fact.
Which Los Angeles-based new wave band featured a Casiotone M10 in their 1983 promo video for their quirky hit single? The answer is Wall of Voodoo. Wall of Voodoo, a somewhat off-the-wall and experimental new wave band, had a big hit in 1983 with their song Mexican Radio. During the video, you can see keyboard player and also bassist Chaz T. Gray holding a Casiotone M10 and miming the droning keyboard sound during the song. At 1:45 and 3:36, a solo is played that sounds like it might be a Casiotone M10, but is supposedly a mariachi-style harmonica. According to Wikipedia, this part is played live by an organ synthesizer. Though I can't find out what was used on the studio recording. It's possible that the M10 was used, but maybe it was just used for the video itself. Starting with the piano. This is the piano completely dry with no effects. And this is the piano with reverb. This is the piano with some chorus as well as reverb. Next up is the violin. This is the violin completely dry. And this is violin with some phaser. And this is the violin with some chorus and delay. And now we're going to play the flute dry. And this is the flute with some phaser and delay. And this is the flute with just some reverb, with quite a familiar little melody. Now we're going to do the organ. This is the organ, completely dry. And now we're going to play it with some chorus and delay. And this is the organ with a rotary speaker effect. Putting the M10 through the Behringer V-amp really does enhance its sound and expands its sound and takes it to a very different level. It also opens up a lot more possibilities and potential of what you could use the Casiotone M10 for in a recording or even being played live.
M10 Fun Fact.
Which groundbreaking UK synthpop band used a Casiotone M10 to record the lead melody on their UK Top 10 hit single that was released in September 1981? The answer is Sheffield's finest, the Human League. Yes, the humble little M10 gets a starring role playing the lead melody in the chorus of Open Your Heart, both on its own and also harmonising with the mighty Philip Oakey. It also makes another possible appearance alongside Phil singing during the song Bridges. Though this part might be a VR1, as it sounds possibly like the VR1's fantasy preset, I also have to say that the only reason that I bought an M10 in the first place was because of the Human League connection. I absolutely love the Human League, and Dare, which I have right here, was a massively influential album for me when I was growing up in the early 1980s, and even today it ranks in my all-time top 5 favourite albums. And yes, that's me at one of their gigs with Phil giving his all behind me. Both the Casiotone M10 and Casio VR1 are listed on the inner sleeve of the Dare album under the Instruments Used heading, along with all the other equipment. The VR1's Fantasy preset is unmistakable on the track Get Carter. But I could never work out where the M10 had been used. It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I read online in a discussion forum that it was the M10's flute preset that was used to play the Open Your Heart main melody. I tried this with my own M10, and with a bit of reverb, OMG, there it was. I also need to mention that there is conflicting information out there on the web regarding the Casios used in Dare, including in some published interviews. I did as much research as I could, and as there's a fair bit to cover, I'll put everything else I found into a separate video specifically covering the Casios used in Dare. That video will include in-depth audio examples and demonstrations to show which tracks I believe the M10 and VR1 to have been used on. I'll call it the Great Human League and Casiotone M10 Mystery. But for now, I'm 99% sure that the lead melody in Open Your Heart was recorded using an M10 and not a VR1 as stated in some publications. To put myself and Miss Jersey into the advert and in place of the original man and dog wasn't that complicated, but did require quite a bit of work to achieve the effect. Probably the most amount of work went into graphical editing and reconstructing of the advert itself, as I had to remove the man, keyboard and dog and then rebuild the picture using a graphics editing program to fill in the empty spaces. To do this, I used the excellent open source GIMP graphics editor. It was fairly painstaking having to try and reconstruct the voids, in some cases pixel by pixel, and by also using parts of the remaining image to build the picture back up as if the man, dog and Casiotone keyboard weren't ever there. I used the layers feature and many of the GIMP editing tools to achieve this, and considering that I have no photo editing training, I think I did a pretty good job. I also made the lower text section and M10 picture a separate layer, as this could then be placed over the video to hide a multitude of sins. With the magazine advert reconstructed, I then had to plan on how to record myself and Miss Jersey so that I could convincingly chroma key, which is green screening, both of us into it. Jersey was somewhat a challenge, as she is a senior dog and doesn't like to sit up for very long and will lie down if nothing is happening. To get her to stay sitting up, we had to tempt her with treats, but that got her very excited and she kept trying to move towards the treat. It took multiple attempts to capture just enough footage to use, and even then I only managed to get about 15 seconds total of her in one ideal position. I actually needed 52 seconds. What I ended up doing was to take 2 short pieces of this footage, ran some of them forwards and then backwards to extend the length, and also merged two of these forward and back clips together. It did make Jersey's movement a bit odd in places, but it gave me enough footage duration to fit the video that she would be in. For myself, I had to try and replicate a similar seating position and also height of the M10 on the table as with the man and Casiotone M10 in the original advert. After some experimenting, I managed to get something close enough to this, and I also found a good camera angle to capture the shot. This was all set up with a green background, not just behind me, but also on the table and on my seat, as I wanted only myself and the M10 to be seen. That way, when I chroma keyed this footage onto the original advert, the couch, table, and background would show through as if I was sitting on the couch in the reconstructed picture. Once I finally had everything set up, I played the M10 recording I made of "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window" out loud on a loop so that I could mime along with it, and also so that the camera would pick up this audio to aid synchronizing when importing this footage into the video editor. I hit record on the camera, and after a number of takes plus some trial and error, eventually I was happy with the results. Once I had the footage I needed of me in Jersey, I then imported these into the Shotcut video editor along with the edited and reconstructed original Casiotone M10 advert placed at the bottom layer. I activated the chroma key filter on the footage of me in Jersey to remove the green background, and then resized and repositioned the video footage so that we appeared to be in the same places as the man and dog in the original advert. I also imported the original audio track that I had previously recorded with the M10 into the editor and synchronized my miming to it. When I was happy that everything was in the right place and synchronized, I placed the lower text and M10 picture as the top layer to hide any video below that wasn't needed, exported the video, and Shotcut rendered the project down to an MP4. That was how it was done, and I have to say, I am quite pleased with how it turned out. And there you have it, the Casiotone M10. Where is it? There we go, there. The first of the compact mini keys Casio keyboards from 1981. That even though it's not well known today, compared with some other Casio models, it's actually a lot more famous than most people probably remember. I was very pleasantly surprised when researching its history at just how many famous connections it has. And though these connections are from association with famous artists in promotional videos and photographs, the M10 still deserves its place in popular culture. Testament to this is that such a little keyboard ended up playing the main melody in a top 10 Human League hit single, and also spawned generations of mini keys portable keyboards from multiple manufacturers to this day. Because back in 1980, Casio were breaking the mold by offering simple, reliable, portable, and very affordable electronic keyboards available to the mass consumer at a time when the average electronic keyboard was large, bulky, and expensive. Furthermore, Casio's use of consonant vowel synthesis was an early form of digital tone generation and made keyboards such as the M10 very reliable and with extremely stable tuning. And I think we've got you a little bit more stable now, haven't we, Miss Jersey? The fact that a 4-decade-old keyboard is still in perfect tune after all these years, and likely having never been serviced since new, is a credit to its design. However, when it comes to using the M10 in the modern age, its simple design, basic features of only 4 tones with vibrato, and its 2.5 octave keyboard range, it's somewhat too limiting for anything other than perhaps adding some parts to a multi-track recording alongside other instruments. Certainly, limitations can breed creativity, but unless you start applying effects and maybe using pitch shifting to increase its sonic range, I feel it's perhaps too restrictive to use on its own and in an unmodified state. For those that still want that vintage Casiotone consonant vowel sound and character, perhaps the more feature-rich models, such as the CT301 that uses the same sound generation LSI chip as the M10, the MT30 M10 successor, and the later much more feature-packed and compact models such as the MT65, MT68 and MT400 are much more flexible and useful. As such, the M10 is certainly a sweet-sounding and collectible vintage Casiotone model to own from an historical context, but I wouldn't advise paying more than, say, $50 maximum or so for one, when you could get virtually the same sound and much more from Casio models a year or so later. We also need to thank our special guest, Miss Jersey, for her acting skills, or overacting skills maybe, is that right? And for stealing the show in our recreation of that vintage M10 advert. I'm sure that performance will get you nominated for Best Leading Actress in this year's Dogsker Awards. And that's it for this video. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen, please don't forget to press the like and the subscribe buttons, and remember, keep it Casio.